All right, thank you guys so much for coming. This is very exciting. It's our second screen on the green. We've already learned so much, and we're very excited for the turnout today. Of course, we always have to have something go wrong, so I'm sorry about the volume. We had a wind gust blow a few things over just before everybody got here, so we're rolling as best we can. We are very excited for our film. We're showing Garbage Warrior. It's about housing alternatives that are very sustainable, and we're very, very lucky because our guest speaker is Rosemary Kimble, who's actually participated in building her own Earthship Biotecture, the type of architecture featured in this film right here. She's done a lot of wildlife photography. She's an animal communicator. She's been involved in this wonderful program and one of these wonderful houses herself. So we're very excited for her to give us a rundown on what it's like to be involved with an alternative sustainable housing project, what that looks like, and some of the obstacles involved in building something that's not your standard typical housing structure. So without further ado, please help us welcome Rosemary Kimble.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Like she said, my name is Rosemary, and I built an Earthship in Royston, just about 45 minutes from here. And that was completed about 6 years ago. So I'm here to kind of tell you my story and what it took to do that. It was quite an accomplishment. It was the biggest thing I've ever done in my life, and something I'm very proud of. So we were actually inspired by Michael Reynolds, who was the originator of Earthships, and by the film that you're going to see tonight. And my ex-partner and I, Andrew Hickman, built this together. He is a brilliant, ingenious person. So just to give you a little background, the first time I ever saw an Earthship, I was in New Mexico in 1993. And when I saw it, I thought, I need to live in one of those one day. That has to be my home. And then I promptly forgot about them for about 20 years until I saw Garbage Warrior. So I've always had this really strong desire to live sustainably, supporting the earth. And this was the structure that I found that could do that the most, more than anything I'd ever seen before. So once we saw the film, we immediately decided this is for us. This is what we need to do. So Andrew went out to New Mexico and studied with Earthship Biotecture for a month and learned everything he could. Then he came back and he helped with a build in South Georgia. There's only 2 Earthships in Georgia. I think there's only 400 in the world. And soon after that, we bought land and we paid for our Earthship the whole entire time we were building it, debt-free. So it took us a little while to build, going debt-free. We did all of this, we paid for it all through my business as a henna tattoo artist and a face painter. So when we weren't building, we were on the road traveling, doing festivals to make the money to pay for the Earthship. Andrew built 85% of this home single-handedly. He wouldn't even let me cut the bottles for the bottle bricks. He was that into it. But I was fine. I was exhausted from doing henna all the time. So, and as I said, it took 6 years for us to build the home. So once we were quite a bit into it, it started to get a lot of media attention. We were on Clark Howard and CNN Headline News, the Weather Channel. We were in Natural Awakenings. And there was just a lot of response. In the beginning, the first response was, "You're crazy, you'll never be able to do that," which I've heard many times in my life, and obviously I don't listen. So we did it, and the media response was huge. People were just like blown away that this was even a thing. There were some goals in building this home. So the goals were for it to be solar powered, as well as using passive solar, and I'll explain some of that. For there to be a rainwater collection system, to reuse glass bottles, and to have a gray water cell for reusing the bath and laundry water, and for the natural cooling system. And all of these are things that work with an Earthship. In choosing the land, there's some really important things. First of all, if you're going solar, you need to have the solar panels would be facing due southeast. We also built up on a hill so that we could just see the land around us, and also we wanted to be higher as far as drainage. But because we're built into the earth, people couldn't see us on the hill, but we could look down and see them. And then the most important thing, if you're going to build some sort of off-grid structure, is that you have an amazing building inspector who is okay with all of the crazy things that you're going to do. So we got very lucky in that department, because you don't know who you're going to get. You just buy the land and you hope for the best. So we were very blessed with our building inspector. But first we had to do some homesteading. Obviously we couldn't live in an unbuilt home. So we lived in our Airstream, which Andrew renovated, and we used a human manure composting system for 4 years. Now, this was one of my favorite parts of it all, because I'm so into reuse and recycling, and I had never heard of human manure composting before, but it turned out to be this incredible, magnificent thing. I'm always aware of like, what is our waste and where is it going? And with human manure, I always felt like that's just, you know, when we're using these toilets, that's one more way that we're just throwing away things without taking any responsibility for ourselves for what happens to our own waste. So for me, this was huge, because it was like, wow, I'm in absolute responsibility of my own waste, and I've seen where it's going, and it's going to be used later. So this is our little shed here, which is where we had our compost, our human manure compost system, and where we did our dishes. We had just a small cistern of water that we actually had to go and borrow water from neighbors until we got situated. So with Earthships, the foundation is made from rammed earth tires. You'll see this in the film. One of the reasons why Michael Reynolds started building Earthships was to reuse and recycle things, and he noticed that tires were a huge waste factor in the earth, and so we thought that was a really great idea. However, upon Andrew's work and upon doing the research on Earthships and ramming tires, we learned that it takes 1 to 2 hours to ram the dirt into a tire to be used as a foundation. And you need about 1,500 to 2,000 tires for your foundation. So us doing this all alone, that was just not gonna work. But also, I'm very sensitive, especially my mother, to chemicals and things. So I've been very aware my whole life about off-gassing of different things. So I was concerned that these tires might off-gas petroleum into our air as we grew old. And I just felt that wasn't a good idea. So we decided to go with a concrete foundation. We researched everything, looked into everything. Hempcrete at the time was not load bearing, so that wasn't gonna work. Much to the chagrin of many Earthship people, we built with concrete. But that was what was gonna work for us, so that's what we did. So here we are, laying the foundation, the concrete and the back wall. Now the back wall is the part that's going to be up against the earth. So you're built into the earth, but you have a roof and then you have a front face with the greenhouse. The back wall is in the earth. So we needed to do a lot of things to protect the home from the earth in the back wall. That's where your vapor barrier, drainage, and the French drain come in. So because the earth can create moisture that comes into the home, Andrew kind of engineered a way to create a very incredible vapor barrier that was in the floor and in the back wall. So moisture was not coming into the home from the earth behind us. At one point during the build, we started realizing there could be some drainage issues. There was rain for several days, and I remember Andrew getting up in the middle of the night and freaking out about this and deciding, now's the time, we're gonna build a French drain. So for 3 days, he was out here, you know, drilling and creating this drainage, which uses a lot of gravel. It was a huge ordeal, but I'm glad we figured that out early on. So once all of the foundation is put in, we're starting with the structure. Well, here we've jumped into the interior structure, but we obviously had to put the roof on and do all of that. We had hoped that we were going to use repurposed wood, but that also turned out to be such a huge chore, and also finding it, because you have to take the nails out of all of that wood. And if you're thinking of every single board having however many nails and you have to go through and pull those, it was just way too labor intensive and also pretty expensive to just find repurposed wood. So we found a good lumber company near Athens that was using non-treated wood, and we were actually able to use the sawdust from that in our human manure composting toilet, which was excellent. Now, this is one of the fascinating things that people love about Earthships is the bottle bricks. So bottle bricks are used in walls and windows, and we got really into it. We actually had a guy down at the DeKalb Farmers Market in Atlanta who was saving us blue bottles. At the time, like Bud Light or some beer company was manufacturing these blue glass bottles, which we've never seen since. But luckily we ended up with like truckloads of those bottles. And so we were able to create blue bottles for our windows that were just beautiful. And so you can see here, hopefully, the center of our bottle brick making process. There's a lot to it. Okay, so the cooling system. Now, when you're in Taos in New Mexico and you're looking at those Earthships, they have this incredible cooling system, which is also part of what fascinated us about Earthships. And so the way it works is you have these two really long pipes that go behind the house. Hopefully you can see that, the middle picture. Those are basically going to be under the ground at the bottom of the back wall, and they'll be covered in dirt. And then on top of them, the picture down in the right corner, I don't know if you can see it, are where they come up. So you have this smaller tube running out of the house where there's holes in the house that the airflow is coming through. And then there's a sudden like 90-degree angle curve that goes up into these larger tubes. And so it's like a vacuum where it's pulling the air naturally out of the home. Now, when you're in Taos and you stand in one of these things, you can really feel it pulling. But what we learned is that it didn't work very well in the Southeast, unfortunately. So what we had to do was end up putting little small electric fans in each of our vent tubes inside the Earthship to make sure that the air was getting out. And it definitely helped a lot. So the idea was that because the tubes are under the ground, you're getting that cool air from the thermal mass, and that's not true. I'm getting confused. Forget that. That is one of the reasons, though, of being in the ground, the thermal mass, to keep the home cool. But the cooling vents had nothing to do with that. The other thing is the roof vents. So you can see on the left picture or on the top right, that is also a big cooler, because the way an Earthship is built is the whole front of your house is a greenhouse. It's 2 layers of windows. And so the heat gets trapped in that greenhouse and needs a way to escape. So these cooling vents were created on a pulley system using no electricity, so that they could open just by pulling a rope and the heat would escape. So we are making progress after about 4 years living in the Airstream, and we're ready to move into the house. Now we move in, but I think actually when we moved in we had no windows yet, so we were open to the elements. So we had a queen size bed that was covered with a mosquito net to protect us from the southeast vermin. Obviously, a solar system is a huge part of having an off-grid home. This is the battery pack and the electrical outlet. Andrew brilliantly did so much research. I mean, I know very little compared to him, although I was there for the process. I can't remember all the little details, but he figured this all out and even started working for a solar company. He taught himself to do everything on this home. He had renovated a couple of houses beforehand, but he taught himself plumbing, electric. I mean, everything that was done on this home, he did himself just by teaching himself. But he's a smart guy, so he was able to do it, no problems, everything worked out, passed inspections and whatnot. So the other huge part of an Earthship is the Rainwater Collection. So here you can see our roof. The roof is made with a metal that's actually food grade. It's a food grade paint that's on the metal, which I don't even know how he found that. We wanted to be sure that the water we were collecting was safe for drinking. So the roof was put in, and these big white things in the back are the cisterns. So we wanted to be absolutely sustainable no matter what happened in the future. And Michael Reynolds, when he builds his Earthships, I think they only use like one or two of these cisterns, even in New Mexico where the rainfall is like minimal. But we used 3. And we found that with the 2-hour rainfall, we could pretty much fill a couple of these. So we had water all the time, constantly. We were never going to have to worry about water. Now you do have to consider how to make the water clean and safe for drinking. Since then, I have learned there's other ways to do this, but we created this major filtration system. It went through 4 different filters. Having done some travel in the Virgin Islands, I see that they use an infrared system, just infrared light. And they've been doing this for a couple decades with no problem. No one gets sick from the water, and most of the homes do that. So I don't know that this is necessary, but we did everything we could to make sure it was completely safe and potable water. So to the thermal mass and passive solar. Here is the front of the house, which is where the greenhouse is. So passive solar is when you're using the light of the sun to warm the house. And what happens is the sun throughout the year is at different points in the sky. In the winter, it's at the lowest point. And so you face the house so that it's facing where you're going to get the most sunlight at that winter time, where the sun is coming right into those windows, and it's a great way to warm the house. And then being built into the ground, you're also with thermal mass, which keeps the home from getting too hot, the inside of the home away from the greenhouse. I think probably someone here remembers, but I think the temperature of the earth is like, was it 62 or 64? So the idea is that your home is going to stay, that temperature. It's not going to get too hot, the part that's by the earth. We did not have any heating yet when we were in this big snow here. It was 12 degrees outside, which we rarely get those temperatures here in Georgia, but it was that cold. And we had all these windows still and not much sun. So the temperature in the home was staying at about 45, which is pretty incredible considering it was 12 degrees outside and we had no heat. So the greenhouse and the windows. So there's 2 sets of windows. There's the set that is to the outdoors, and then there's the second set of windows that divides the greenhouse from the home. And the point of this is so that you're keeping your hotter air separate from the main home, and also that warm heat is going and helping the greenhouse plants grow. And in the greenhouse, we we had done some research traveling in Central America and such, seeing that they were using banana trees to filter water. And in the greenhouse is also where the gray water cell is. So this picture on the left-hand side, under where all the planting is, that is where our gray water cell is. So we planted banana trees because they're a great filtration system. We tried to plant things that were going to be really great to oxygenate the air and to also filter that water. So as you can see, the cooling vents are really important. They're actually in the greenhouse to release that hot air, as it can get really hot in there. So here's the gray water cell. Basically, it's a gravity-fed system. So our bathtub is built higher so that all the water draining from the bathtub is going to easily get to the gray water cell. We're only using gray water from our bathtub and our washer dryer because any gray water from the sink and such is going to have grease and things from food in it that may not be healthy for the plants. But we still were able to reuse a massive amount of water doing those things. Also, we did use the humanure in our greenhouse, which I was so excited about. The process with humanure is that you're going to let it sit for a year before you use it. We let it sit 2 years because we were just concerned about pathogens, and well, we had the time because we were still building. But before using it, I actually had the soil tested, and they found no pathogens. They said that what they recommend is that we didn't use it for topsoil because we were growing food. So we grew all kind of things, lettuce and kale and all kind of edibles in the greenhouse as well, using the humanure soil. Finally, after 6 years, we complete the home and we are living in a beautiful place that we love. It took so much energy to build this place, so much energy, so much resources. It was difficult on the relationship. It was everything you can imagine, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But with that comes the greatest accomplishment you ever do. This place was like my heart and soul. It was like a work of art, and we did everything we could to just make it beautiful and unique. And yeah, I loved it. I loved this place so, so much. But life happens, and my partner and I split up, and you can't split an Earthship, so we had to sell it. The concrete is all stained. It ends up looking beautiful, like marble. And so the building timeline was basically that we bought land in 2008, started building in 2009. We lived in the Airstream and homesteaded for 4 years. Then we moved into the Earthship in 2012, and it was completed in 2015. So quite a long process. Most of that time was spent either building or on the road making money to build. We were eating beans and rice most of the time. We were putting everything we had into it. And we had really big dreams for the future of it all. But as I said, life changes. And I learned so much. We got one bit of final press on the cover of the real estate book. You guys have probably seen it around town. And we sold it. Thank goodness. So I was looking through pictures. I couldn't find one picture of me with the Earthship. This is a screenshot of a video. Everything's with Andrew because he was building the whole time, and I didn't want to be on cameras. So I achieved my greatest accomplishment, which was to live sustainably in support of the earth. And I really wanted to inspire others by doing this work and to educate about what it takes to do this, and then to learn all that I could about sustainable living. If you want to learn more about the Earthship, we do have a page on Facebook called Northeast Georgia Earth Home. And that kind of goes through the whole process. There's a lot you can learn there if you want to check that out. So where am I today? Well, before COVID, I was doing wildlife volunteering around the world. I love animals. I've been doing that for like 15 years, but when the Earthship ended, I just followed my dream and started traveling anywhere and everywhere to be near wildlife and doing wildlife photography. And now I'm doing retreats. I have a company called Adventures in Empowerment, and we have a couple of retreats coming up, one in Guatemala and one in Asheville for women. So if you want to check out adventuresinempowerment.com, check it out. But I also am doing animal communication, which is, I'm a pet psychic and I'm a medium. And you can find Calm and on Instagram. You can also find some of my articles in Natural Awakenings Atlanta in a column called Walking Each Other Home. It's all spiritual based. But my next goal is to move to Belize. And having lived in an Earthship, I can tell you what I learned is that I will never build into the earth again. Because what happens is here in the Southeast anyway, it's just way too moist. So unless you have constant airflow the entire time, you're going to get mold. And the problem with that is that having constant airflow means using your electricity. And if you're gone for 2 or 3 weeks, you can't check on your solar to make sure there's enough that's keeping the airflow going. So if I was to leave the country and the solar stopped and the airflow stopped, then the mold was going to grow. So I will never do that again. I'm never building in the earth again, unless maybe I live in Taos, you know. So my current plan, because I'm so into reuse and recycling, is to buy a home that's already been built, because in Belize it's going to be a lot easier than trying to bring in materials anyway, and then to retrofit it so that it collects rainwater and does solar and gray water. So that's my goal. That's my plan for the next one. And that's my story. I think that's it. All right. Yeah. Questions? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? For real? Yeah.
So just in general about how common either across the anywhere that you've been are earthships that are similar to yours? Are they becoming more popular, or is it still like small groups?
It's still pretty small. And I don't know of anyone who's built with concrete. I think there's maybe 400 Earthships in the whole world. But Earthship Biotecture does projects in other countries too. They use a lot of tires because they're trying to recycle. So you can find them in lots of places, but it's a small movement still. Yes? Yeah, so the defining feature of an Earthship, why it got its name, is because it is built into the earth. I'm not sure about the ship part. That's what kind of throws people off, you know, and make them think you're kind of crazy when you tell them you're building an Earthship. So that's the defining feature, but also the rammed earth tires is a big part of it, and the cooling system, and then obviously the rainwater and the solar. The advice I would give if you're interested in building off-grid, I would there's 2 different sets of batteries that you can buy. I would get the more expensive one because they're going to last longer. Also, we found that because we were gone so much, we couldn't always watch the solar to make sure we had enough. So we ended up connecting to the grid. But we had a system where we could take it off the grid when we wanted. So the grid would just, if we were getting low on solar, it would just charge our batteries up really fast because we didn't have enough sun or whatever. So I don't know that I recommend that, but definitely you want to be where you're going to get plenty of sun, because there will be times of year when you're not going to have that and you need that storage in your battery system.
As a follow-up to hers, were you using a microinverter?
I can't tell you.
Okay.
I
It sounds like a microinverter, but my real question was, when you go to Belize, you're going to learn how to cut your own bottles and make your own bottles, right?
Yes, I know how to do it. I just wasn't allowed to cut my own bottles. I was fine with that because he was really into it, and it is pretty dangerous. Like cutting bottles, you need to be wearing goggles and this whole suit, you know, and there's like wet glass flying all the time. And I think he was just really concerned because I was the moneymaker that something might happen to me and we'd lose income. So I'm not so worried about that anymore, but yes, I will be doing that when I'm in Belize. Yes.
Did you have a lot of like issues with like building codes and like getting permits? And if so, like, are there any clear avenues that you would say need to be changed so that alternative housing is more accessible?
Well, there's a lot of codes that need to be changed. You will learn from this video that the Earthships, especially if you're using ram tires, that was the other thing. We were never going to pass code if we built with ram tires. But when they build these Earthships, they find what they call peace pods, which are places way out in the middle of nowhere where there is no zoning, so they can do whatever they want. So for us, we were very lucky to have a really good inspector who was open-minded to all of these things. We were not going to get away with human manure composting. That is not code, so we had to put a septic in. But he was very generous and open to everything we were doing along the way. It probably has also to do with what your communication skills are, because Andrew was a very good people person and could become friends, you know, easily. So they trusted him and they could see that he knew what he was doing. I will say that over those years, we had so many calls from people who wanted to build their own, and it is such an enormous undertaking that just being on the phone for them a few minutes to tell them what we were going through may have deterred some people, because it's a massive project. It's like your whole life. And if you don't have the energy to do it yourself, then you're hiring someone. It would have cost twice as much if we had to hire out all of this work. That answer your question? Anybody else? Okay.
We'll give it up for Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.